failure is almost sort of the new metric, right? If we look at any of the key KPIs.
Hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Health Launchpad and HIMSS. Hi, I'm Adam Trinas and I'm your host for today. I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. And I want to give a big thank you to two groups. First of all, to you for listening, for watching, whichever way you choose to consume today's particular episode. And also a massive thank you to the fine people at HIMSS who make this podcast possible. So today is all about a topic we haven't really covered yet, and I can't think why in 30 episodes we haven't really touched on it, but it's about time. And today's episode is about marketing operations, also known as marketing ops or even MarOps, if you're really groovy. I have my great friend here, somebody I've known for quite a while, the one and only Mr. Milton Hwang. Milton is the principal of Mission Martech. This is a firm that focuses on marketing technology and marketing operations. And prior to founding this firm, Milton has a very impressive career in marketing and technology, in healthcare and in several other industries. And so I'm so delighted to have you on the show today, Milt. So Milt, tell us about yourself, your background, and this new adventure with Mission Martech.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Adam, for having me, and great to be speaking with you, and really appreciative of the HIMSS community as well, given some of my healthcare IT background. So as you mentioned, now focusing on marketing technology and marketing operations, but that comes on the heels of 30 years in corporate leadership roles, leading teams, global initiatives, including 20 years with GE Healthcare. Following that, been at a variety of other leading corporate brands that diversified into the healthcare payer and health savings account space. So very much a healthcare industry vertical, not as well, very passionate about this space. And, from a functional perspective, I've been leading digital transformation for over 20 years. So really, really focused on driving the business value that comes from digital and new technology. Examples of that would have been, aligning roles and initiatives with both the CIO community as well as the CMOs, the chief marketing officers. My last major project at GE Healthcare was the global rollout of Salesforce paired with Marketo. So really passionate about this area, and now, as you mentioned, fueled by that passion to work with a diversified set of clients through Mission Martech.
That's great. So your superpower is marketing ops, marketing operations. So I think most people have heard of RevOps, and only a lot of people have heard of marketing ops. But give us a definition of like marketing ops. Is it different from RevOps, and sort of where the nuance is?
Absolutely, yes. It's really come into its own, I would say, in the last 5 years. The way that I talk about it is with a lot of these new functions that have oftentimes been infused and driven through digital transformation. It starts out almost as a mixed bag of hybrid responsibilities that don't fit into any of the other functions, right? So with a nod to Scott Brinker, who's a leading voice in this space, who referred to it as the island of misfit toys, if you will, for those Rudolph the Red folks out there. And it really was true. It was oftentimes everything else that didn't fit into product marketing or brand or creative, right? Key responsibilities, but oftentimes, with a nod to all the folks that are leaders now in that space, picking up the adjacent responsibilities that were necessary to make marketing run. But it's really evolved over the last 5 years, I would say, to really being a strategic enabler, very much because of the area of marketing technology. So happy to expand on that further.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Scott Brinker, because Scott Brinker is well known for his website, which is chiefmartech.com, right?
Yeah.
He does those amazing maps of marketing technology. And I mean, I remember looking at it, last time I looked was a couple of years ago. I think there were over 9,000 different solutions, and he's got them clustered into little islands. And it's just, I think it's the most, I'm a big fan of maps.
Yeah.
And that really does it for me. I'm a bit sad.
Absolutely. When he first started producing those landscape maps, and the latest edition that fast moving, of course, in this area is over 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, it's just amazing. But really, we all needed a common language, right? Yeah. In the world of, certainly healthcare, we all function on common definitions and processes. But then in this area of marketing ops, we needed a language. So even the role of marketing ops, Martech, Scott and his related partner teams that I follow similarly, help coin some common language and labels so that we could drive further business value, not to just accumulate a list of associated tasks, if you will, right? So
so
really
defining the categories in that regard, right? Yeah,
exactly.
That's fascinating. I mean, I'm curious. It's like it's grown from, I think, 7,000 to 10,000 over the last 3 or 4 years. What are some of the emerging categories? What are some of the kind of new clusters that are coming up on the map?
Yeah, I would say very much a nod to the growing categories, of course, given that it is already April 2023, the rapid infusion of AI is a massive hype that of course, if I didn't mention that as the leading category, but the interesting aspect of AI is the thought leaders are really talking about it not just as a new category. It's going to completely revamp and cause a reinvestment in the entire landscape, because it's really not a separate category. Each category will actually be infused, if you will, with the artificial intelligence technology. And I'm actually predicting that there's going to be a revival and reinvestment in the core CRM, the customer relationship management platforms, and the core maps. It's funny that you mentioned the affection for maps. So the core marketing automation platforms are referred to as core map, and those capabilities are going to be rapidly infused. But then, just to return back to your question, of course, the new category or infusion is in the world of content and creative, right? There's just been a huge influx immediately of content assistant tools directly integrated into the marketer's workflow, as well as, of course, image generation. So it's those generative capabilities that are really the newest influx. But again, the thought leaders are saying they're just temporarily a separate category. Very quickly, they will be then sort of embedded directly.
It makes sense. By the way, I want to give a nod to you that you actually managed to make it probably 10 minutes into the podcast without saying AI, which I thought was, I was amazed you didn't have it in your intro, actually.
Yes. And there's probably been some new announcement in those 10 minutes. Well, of course, that's just been, for followers of the Gartner hype cycle and other models, the pace of change is the new trend, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, lovely. I like that. The pace of change is the new trend. Very cool. So as we put on a t-shirt, your company is called Martech, Mission Martech.
Yep.
Is there a difference in terms of role or definition between Martech and marketing operations? Is there? It's a bit nuanced, but I'm kind of curious to hear your thought on that.
Absolutely. It's one of the key areas, actually, that, and again, this is one of those areas that within marketing or all of our industries, just like healthcare, we find a way to subdivide it, of course, because we're all trying to look for what is that tight specialty, skill that we're bringing. At the same time, we all know that we need to partner with our adjacent functions, right? So oftentimes marketing technology and marketing operations come up in the same conversation, because as functions we're looking to digitize to drive efficiency and effectiveness through automation and technology, oftentimes, unless you were a very large organization, that may have been a half-time, FTE resource, right? Somebody that had that technology edge. So you needed an organizational home. So oftentimes that was then paired with the campaign process management responsibility or project management organization. And so the marketing tech and marketing operations field basically grew together because they were, if you will, sort of those individual tools and individual contributors that over time needed an organizational home. Mm-hmm. And this is very much sort of my personal philosophy. It can never be about the technology, right? It's got to be driven by people and process first, and then fueled by the platforms. And so I don't think you're ever really going to truly have dedicated pure Martech organizations within marketing teams. You're going to have a marketing ops organization, and that's typically going to be the organizational home, if you will, for the technologist. And every technologist is going to say the same thing. It can't be tools for tools' sake. It's got to be people and process, and hence the affiliation with marketing operations.
And do you see organizations where Martech and RevOps merged together?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's again, with a nod to Scott Brinker out there, predicted the movement, if you will, towards big ops, if you will, right? So, and this is part of my diverse background at
big ups to you too.
Yeah, some of my post adventures included hybrid roles at smaller organizations, and again, that's respectful to those organizations as well. But we couldn't afford, in some cases, a dedicated sales operations person that also knew how to administrate Salesforce or HubSpot. So because I was already helping manage the process and the platforms in those tools, that I was often asked to take on a different cap, if you will, and manage part of sales ops. So then when you really power and partner between sales ops and marketing ops, that's then the evolution, of course, to revenue operations. Mm-hmm. And I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, we get a little bit too hung up, if you will, on sort of the organizational reporting lines, right? Is marketing losing its seat at the table if it's then part of marketing ops reporting to sales and the chief revenue, officer or something like that? It's always been about that cross-functional partnership, regardless of the organizational lines. And I think this movement to marketing ops, sales ops, and then the natural evolution to revenue ops is just that progression of formalizing what we all knew all along in terms of partnership and alignment.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that the names are changing. I mean, the kind of latest hot thing in B2B is the sort of resurgence of GTM, go-to-market. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the notion of, GTM, the best description I've heard of it is this like, it's the sort of complete growth organization. So it's product marketing, sales, and marketing, all thinking as one, with GTM basically being the connective tissue. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes like GTM ops.
Yes.
Because it is actually about that connection.
Absolutely.
But, so, you've got a very interesting background. I mean, I've been in the marketing world for longer than I care to admit. And when I started, when people came from marketing, from two different areas. They were either more creative marketers, like Coke during the classic 80s and 90s, the mega brand building days. They were the people who led marketing at Coke were very creative types. Then, the other school was more the Procter & Gamble school, which was highly analytical, very disciplined strategically, rigorous, more not not necessarily coming from a math background, but definitely thinking about things in an analytical world. It's changed. And I think your background, so tell everybody a bit about your where you come from, your educational history, because I think you might be an indicator of the new emerging, where marketing's coming going towards?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for that opportunity to just sort of delve into a little bit of my personal and professional story. I'm very open about it, and talking about where you start is not necessarily where you're going to end. So I originally came out of my undergrad in electrical and computer engineering. Not the most typical start, as you mentioned, for a marketer. And I was very lucky, and a huge, debt of gratitude for GE in the fact that they had a established reputation for hiring in, just technical talent, and then letting them go across functions and bring that problem solving skill set, if you will. So lately I've actually coined myself as a little bit of a Martech engineer, if you will, and that catches people off guard a little bit. But because we're also talking about marketing ops, I want to talk about the transition from engineering to marketing. I actually was one of GE's initial Six Sigma black belts as a process operations person as well. And so this passion for being the hybrid skill set, if you will, right? And so by the time I then, showed a passion and interest in marketing, it happened to be the time when I was in part-time MBA program at Kellogg. It was then during what is now the first digital marketing transformation, the original .com web 1.0 boom. I helped launch GE Healthcare's first global websites, and that was effectively marketing ops and Martech in its first wave.
Right,
we just, Scott Brinker hadn't coined the terminology yet, and so we weren't calling it that. And that effectively became my personal journey and brand that for the, 20 years since then, I've typically been the marketer willing to work with technology, or vice versa, the technologist dispatched to work with sales, service, or marketing in those commercially facing roles to translate, the cross-functional partnership that is needed to work across those teams. So that's it. Literally, marketing ops and Martech is part of my personal journey, which is why I'm so passionate about it.
Well, and I think the diversity of your education, your training, your experience, I think gives you a very interesting perspective. And you wrote a great series recently on the different types of personas of marketing and Martech people. Tell us a bit about that. That was really interesting.
Yes. Fellow marketers. So I say, words matter. And in the world of AI and the latest acronym that's sweeping the world, right? NLP, natural language processing. It's important to remember that words matter. And so I did a little bit of wordplay for this framework last year, coining the 4 personas of marketing operations under the MOPS term. So I indicated that these 4 personas were Modernizers, Orchestrators, Psychologists, and Scientists. And so, and the persona word is really key, because I'm not saying that then you necessarily, again, depending on size and scale of organization, you're necessarily going to label your roles and team members that way, but it's really a set of principles and a framework to think about the different skill sets and expertise and frame of mind that it's going to take for modern marketing ops and marketing tech folks in these spaces to work. And I think there's very specific direct applicability to those skill sets in the healthcare vertical because of just the complex landscape that we all know.
So let's go through it. Just, at a high level, describe these personas. I'd be very interested if people listening to this can say, oh yeah, I recognize that guy or that gal.
So the first one, is that nod that we've already signaled, Modernizer of this is likely the organizational home in marketing ops for the marketing tech folks, right? It's going to be that person on the team. Again, even if it's not a full-time responsibility, depending on the size of the organization that you're leading, that's the first to experiment with new technology. They may be dispatched to run the vendor evaluation of the platforms. They might be dispatched to work with IT, right? As a cross-functional partnership. So I think the Modernizer is the easiest to explain. The next, in terms of orchestrators, is really a signal of the cross-functional partnership that marketing ops leaders need to signify. They are the most likely person on the marketing team to then be a horizontal connector And again, with huge respect to the other traditional verticals, of course, within marketing, the brand creative folks, the strategists that are leading individual campaigns for the product or service vertical, the orchestrator role is really a what I call a 2X orchestrator. They are pulling together and making sure that the entire marketing team, right? If you think about an orchestra conductor, signaling the different parts of a campaign that all have to come together. But then they're often, because of that cross-functional partnership with IT, product, engineering, compliance, of course, in this day and age, right? So it's a 2X orchestration role. So I think that's sort of the genesis. And then, of course, I had to finish the acronym framework. But I really believe with it that psychologists and scientists are a key part of this modernization, right? So psychologists is the fact that then, Adam, when we both started in marketing, we were looking at aggregated data, right? To some extent, it's said we were launching campaigns out there, but because we didn't have digital tracking, we were putting aggregate impressions and tracking and market research in place. Now, of course, we can track every single digital engagement. So we're literally reading our prospects or customers' minds when we're looking at an analytics report, right? So hence psychologists. And then finally scientists, right? Back to my sort of engineering route. I've gone on record as saying, failure is almost sort of the new metric, right? If we look at any of the key KPIs, right?
Yeah.
In any educational system that you and I grew up in, any of the conversion metrics are quote unquote failing metrics in that context, right? But the key is that every single campaign is now a hypothesis. It's not a single point continuum. It's then building on and testing what worked or what didn't work in the failure context, and then iterating and testing and learning in the next cycle. It's never just a one and done. And so that's the scientist mentality that I put forward. So modernizers, orchestrators, psychologists, and scientists for MOPS.
I love it. So 2 questions. First question is, do people fall, is it, you're either one of the 4, or are there people who are a bit of hybrid?
Everyone I think is going to be a little bit of a hybrid, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote in the piece that it's likely that if you have someone that gravitates towards the analytics side, right? So classic role definition would be sort of on your team, whether or not it's full-time responsibility or not, your analytics person, or again, even if you're outsourcing that to an agency, they're taking on the psychologist and scientist persona, right? So your analytics person is more likely to have the psych and the scientist background, right? Whereas the project managers on your team are likely to have more of that orchestrator role, but then very often they're going to start to have a little bit of that Martech angle with the modernization angle. So I think the M and the O kind of pair together, and then the P and the S will start to gravitate towards roles and responsibilities within your organization.
You sound like a Myers-Briggs for marketing.
It is, whether it's Myers-Briggs, the DISC frameworks, strength finders, we all do need in this, in this complex world, different frameworks to help organize our thoughts. So yeah, big fan of all of those.
One of the things you made me think about is actually, I think we had him on the podcast, Drew Neisser, who's like a legend in B2B and just such an amazing guy. And he wrote a book called Cats. And I can't remember CATS is an acronym as well. I think the C stands for creative. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember what the other 2 the other 3 were, but the same sort of thing, which is it was it's a real sort of interesting way of thinking about the different types of marketers. Okay, so question for you: what are you?
I would say, I definitely with my technology background, I would say I identify first and foremost with that modernizer, but I always, really want to make sure that I emphasize that I am a marketer first, right? So even though it's modernizer, it's the 2 M's together, right? That marketer first, technology and modernization second, because it's got to be people, process, and the platforms. But definitely the modernizer angle.
But I also think you're a bit of the scientist as well. I think it's part of your. I think that's part of your DNA. I mean, that's part of your.
Yes.
You're a very analytical person.
Yes.
And, in the time I've known you, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Real strength. So this has just been fascinating. You know me. You mentioned AI, but the A that I'm always passionate about is ABM.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a little obsessive about it, but hey, you know what? It is what it is. So what do you think? Explain the role of marketing ops in ABM, because it's very important.
Yes.
But it has some specific things about it. Well, talk about that.
Yes. So I think the most quick association between marketing ops and ABM and the framework that we just talked about would be the orchestration, right? Fundamentally, the reason you and I are both passionate about ABM is really understanding the personas of the buyer, right? And getting inside that prospect or current customer, if we're looking at customer retention, really understanding what drives them, what business goals they're driving for, the marketplace that they're serving. And again, because we're speaking with the HIMSS audience as well, is there's no more complex marketplace that out there than the healthcare vertical. So really understanding the demographics and the psychographics of the buyer, right? But then the orchestration is about pulling it all together, right? From identifying that ideal customer profile within ABM, and then driving valuable content, and then of course tracking that buyer journey throughout the funnel. That of course is the orchestration. When you then fuel it with the other personas that we've been talking about, the challenge, because good ABM was just in the time and place that you and I have been leading this. We used to just label it as just really good enterprise or strategic account targeting, right? But the modernization is really helped it scale, right, to a different level through the technology. But then the key aspect that I always emphasize is not just about the efficiency. It's then having the ability to also track it as well with all the data, so you can monitor the effectiveness, right? I get asked this question all the time in terms of, the Martech side of it. And the efficiency angle is that's like the easy nut to crack, right? You're going to gain that. It's really the fact that it's also helping pull together all of that data with the mix of the technology and processes. They're able to monitor the effectiveness of it and then again, iterate, right? If you haven't broken through to that target account yet, that's data, right? On the quote unquote failure is the new metric, to then adjust. If they were an ideal customer profile, just because your campaign approach didn't break through, that didn't change if you did a good job with your ICP, right? It just meant that your campaign approach to break through, right, may not have worked. And constantly adjusting that. So I think that direct alignment in marketing ops as the sort of powering of good ABM strategies is a natural match.
I've had a couple of super smart CMOs, many super smart CMOs on the podcast, but two couple who have really gone the full journey on ABM. And one of the key changes that they had to do was to create a new role. They called them an ABM manager or a demand generation manager that was basically primarily responsible for ABM. But they fit the mix of the personas that you described very, very well. So Milton, this has been so insightful. I mean, I've learned so much just listening to you, and you've given me a lot to think about it. But I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody as we come to a close here, which is, if you could get back into the DeLorean Back to the Future time machine and go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? What was something that you wish you'd known earlier? Yeah,
thanks. And it really is coming down to embracing who you are, and I really appreciate how you framed it, Adam. My one advice to my former self would be to embrace what comes to me, that analytical skill set, the technology skill set, embrace who I am earlier, and not mask it, right? And it goes to that story that when I made that transition, right, from engineering through ops to become a marketer, then I didn't really talk about my engineering background. I felt like, okay, I had arrived. And then sure enough, immediately with Web 1.0, that engineering background was being, brought to light again. So the advice to myself would have been, don't mask, the unique skill sets that you're bringing to your current role and responsibility, because that accumulation of experiences is really the differentiator in whatever you happen to be, target focused on right now.
Very, very wise bit of advice. And actually, I've got a degree in physiology, which I completely ignored for about 20 years until I started a business in healthcare. And then it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And it took me a while to realize, like, yeah, I really kind of should have got I should have embraced that earlier. So I think that's a great perspective. But it's really about, being who you are and what your passion is, what drove you your passion, as a young person is your essence. So thank you, Milt. It's been such a pleasure having you on the pod.
Thanks, Adam. Great.
So before we go, I just want to let you know that if you're watching this, you can listen to it too. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple or Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast application is at the moment. You can also, if you are listening to it, you can also view the video of this through a link in the show notes. We've got lots and lots of great guests coming up on the program. And so if you've got a topic you want to cover, just email me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com. Thank you all for listening or watching, and have a great rest of the day.